Welcome to the Armageddon TV YouTube channel. Zelensky's vicious birds narrow the sky to the Russians. Fireballs are raining down on the Russian army. The Ukrainian Air Force dominates the sky. Even Russian air defense systems cannot neutralize the Ukrainian eagles. In the war where the mutual conflicts continue, the Ukrainian warriors with their modern weapons, high-level military equipment and trained army always seem one step ahead in the Russian army. Putin, who has put into practice new war strategies to change the balance in Ukraine, has not been very successful in achieving his goals so far. Finally, Putin, who plans to add a new atmosphere to the Russian army by bringing Sergei Surovikin, known as General Armageddon, to the head of the army, is trying to increase the pressure on Ukraine and make them give up. Sergei Surovikin, the tongs that Putin uses in these efforts, likes to play with fire. General Sergei Surovikin missile attacks in Ukraine, which disregard the lives of civilians and violate human rights, caused quite a stir on the agenda. The painful attack of the Russian army on Ukraine aims to break the resistance of the Ukrainian people. However, the attack of the Russian army to disrupt the unity and solidarity of the Ukrainians backfired. The Ukrainian people showed that they were not afraid of Putin and his incompetent army by singing the Ukrainian national anthems in unison in the streets, ignoring the Russian missiles raining down on them. The Russian army is trying to hold the temporarily captured territory. The purpose of the Russian army in Ukraine is to prevent the counterattack of the Ukrainian army in certain directions, and at the same time the Russian army is trying to carry out offensive missions in the direction of Bakhmut and Avdiivka. While the Russian army is making new attack plans, the Ukrainian fighters are trying to neutralize the Russian missiles by deploying the latest technology air defense systems against Putin's missile attack. While the Ukrainian army is trying to repel the missile attacks of the Russian army on the city centers, on the other hand, the pride of the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian Eagles, and the Russian army bases are being defeated. In total, Ukrainian Air Force destroyed 4 helicopters, 26 UAVs, and 4 Russian fortresses belonging to the Russian army in their attacks on the Russian army. As a result of the offensive of the Ukrainian Air Force, the Russian army was dealt a heavy blow. These losses, while the Russian army rained missiles on the Ukrainian army, once again proved how capable the Ukrainian army is. The Russian army has become more aggressive with the latest blow from Ukraine. Russian troops attacked several settlements over the Ukraine in Detalion. The Russian army began to bombard the Ukrainian fronts. Russian troops carried out reconnaissance flights with UAVs to determine the Ukrainian fronts and positions. The Russian military continues to target critical infrastructures and civilian homes in Ukraine, violating norms of international humanitarian law, laws and customs of war. In the last 24 hours, the Russian army launched 3 missiles and 21 airstrikes, as well as 104 MLRS salvos, as a continuation of retaliation. Infrastructure facilities and civilian quarters in more than 40 settlements, including Mykolaiv, Vinnytsia, Cherkasky, Chernyakiv, Bilohorivka, Spirne, Pavlivka, Mirny, and Davydiv districts were attacked by Russian troops. The Russian army used cruise missiles and Iranian-made unmanned aerial vehicles in their attacks. Russian officials have threatened further strikes as Moscow tries to worsen the approaching winter by demolishing Ukrainian infrastructure and freezing its people. The other attacks of the Russian army in Ukraine are as follows. In the Seversky direction, attacked the Miropilya, Seredina Buda, Stkavlivka and Pavlivka regions with the Russian mortars and barrel artillery. In the direction of Slobozansky, Russian artillery attacked the areas of Buhrovatka, Krinakivka, Drovikna, Novavovka, Strelekha, Udi, and Chernova Zoria. In the Kramatorsk direction, along the entire line of contact with Russian tanks, mortars, barrel and rocket artillery, especially the areas of Bilohorivka, Zarichne, Novohorivka, Serebiranka, Spirne, Terny, Torske, and Yempovolivka were heavily bombarded. In the direction of Bakhmut, the regions of Bakhmut, Bakhmutske, Zelenopilya, Soledar, Mayorsk, New York and Yakovlivka, where Russian artillery and tanks actively participated. In the direction of Avdiivka, Russian tanks, mortars, barrel and rocket artillery shelled Avdiivka, Krasnohorivka, Mariinka, Nevelsky and Pervomaisky districts. In the Novopavlivka and Zaporizhia directions, Russian troops shelled more than 15 settlements. More than 20 settlements along the contact line in the south Buh direction were damaged by fire. The Russian army encountered strong resistance from the Ukrainian warriors during their attacks. Zelensky's heroic soldiers repelled the attacks of Russian troops in the Bakhmutske, Ozaryanivka, Ivanhard, Bakhmut, and Mariinka districts. Faced with mortar fire, the Russian army retreated to the previously occupied positions. According to information available at the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the city of Tokmak, in the Zaporizhia region, the Ukrainian army, together with the crew, shot down 3 Russian S-300 anti-aircraft missile systems. Injured Russian soldiers were taken to a local hospital. In the Kherson region, as a result of the point-and-shoot damage in the Tokarivka region, Russian losses exceeded 150. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine noted that the Ukrainian Air Force carried out 32 attacks against the Russian army in the last 24 hours. More than 25 sets of weapons and military equipment belonging to the Russian army, as well as 7 anti-aircraft missile systems, were shattered. Russia is accounting for the heavy defeats it has received from the Ukrainian army. Putin stands out as the chief culprit for the failures in Ukraine. Especially in the last few weeks, the great mistake of the mobilization decision taken by Putin has been proved by the coups taken from the Ukrainian army in the regions occupied by Russia. It is reported that the Donetsk region occupied by the Russian army, they have received orders from the top commanders of the Russian troops to suspend offensive operations. The main reason for this is the extremely low morale and psychological state of the recruits, the fact that many desertions from the newly summoned troops and their disobedience to orders. Ukrainians think that Ukraine's allies will never remain silent against Russia's unlawful attacks. Ukrainians have expressed hope that the Russian missile attack on Ukrainian cities will mobilize Western military support and ultimately corner Putin. Deputy head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament, Alexander Meresko, described Russia's missile attack as a sign of Russia's weakness. Meresko revealed the real situation of the Russian army with the words, "Russia cannot win a war on land, so it's trying to scare and terrorize civilians in Ukraine." Alexander Meresko added, "The reluctant European countries cannot ignore any more Russian atrocities. Putin is unconscious enough to target civilians in Ukraine. As with any such escalation, it will provoke a reaction from the West," said the deputy mayor of the western city of Lviv. Kiev's allies were quick to condemn the Russian attacks, while the White House has announced that more advanced anti-aircraft systems will be sent to Ukraine. Germany announced on Tuesday that the first Iris-T anti-aircraft system has reached Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian leaders have been demanding new anti-aircraft systems since the very beginning of the invasion. The inability to provide Kiev with comprehensive anti-missile defense remains a major complaint for Ukrainians. Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs expects the West to take unprecedented steps to ensure complete economic and political isolation of Russia. He stated that it should include the recognition of Russia as a terrorist state. Ukraine has skilled soldiers who can counter the Russian army, but they only need modern weapons to withstand Russian attacks. The only request of the Ukrainian government from its allies is these arms aids, and these aids should be made as soon as possible, that is, before the Russian army can increase the violence of its attacks. Ukrainian President Zelensky determined to use all means to make his call for help heard until his demands are met. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching us.